Initially, Millie hesitated to share her discovery of a black reptile found in the wilderness. However, when it started falling ill in the following days, she realized it was time to seek professional help. But she had not anticipated such an intense reaction from the vet. Startlingly, she was required to distance herself from the creature immediately. Millie was left in disbelief. The moment she revealed to the vet the black reptile she had discovered, his eyes widened in terror, and he jumped back. He yelled at Millie and her dad to pull away. Complying purely out of shock, they could not extract more information from him as he quickly withdrew from the room to make a phone call. It was obvious that he did not want the father-daughter duo to overhear his conversation. Millie was fearful the vet might seize her much-loved reptile. She assumed there must be something seriously wrong, considering his reaction. She was tempted to snatch up the terrarium and flee, but her father restrained her. He understood her sentiments, but was not about to let his daughter disregard the vet's advice. They resolved to wait and confront whatever was coming. Soon enough, the vet returned with extraordinary news. Millie was clueless as to what she had actually salvaged from the wilderness, but the vet was all too familiar with it. It was unbelievable the creature was even in his office, let alone in the country. The incident was beyond his professional skills, prompting him to call in experts. They had a few tough questions for Millie and her dad. But what had Millie really extricated from the wilderness? Was this reptile a threat to her, and why had it petrified the vet so much? Ever since Millie was a little girl, she loved exploring the forest. She was intrigued by nature and mostly by the wildlife it housed. But she had never predicted that one day she would encounter a creature she was not supposed to, an encounter that would alter her young life forever. Millie would generally venture into the forest with her parents or another chaperone. Being a 9-year-old, who knows what dangers might be lurking within the forest? However, on this day, she was out on her own. Millie was longing for an adventure, to be out in the wilderness exploring. Sadly, her parents were not available to accompany her. Her heart ached for the elation that came from exploring. Especially her father, Michael, felt guilty not supporting her dreams. Michael always encouraged his daughter to embrace nature. He believed Millie was ready to venture into nature on her own. She knew the wilderness like a book, having proven her responsibility multiple times. The challenge lay in persuading her mother, Anastasia, and Millie's protector. Anastasia was more cautious than her husband. She could not bear the thought of any harm befalling Millie. Convincing Anastasia was a tall order, yet Michael managed. Anastasia was moved by her daughter's keen interest. Reluctantly, she conceded, realizing she couldn't keep Millie indoors forever. But maybe she should have. The woods were a stone's throw away from their home. Millie could easily reach it. Bursting with joy, she almost pranced to the woods. She brought along containers for collecting bugs. Her plan was to spend an entire afternoon exploring, but an unexpected encounter changed those plans entirely. Suddenly, Millie was no longer interested in bugs or the beauty of the wilderness. Having spent nearly 2 hours in the woods with nothing amiss, Millie was full of joy. She had snapped numerous photos and spotted many charming animals. However, her delight waned when she saw an unusual creature that was far from charming. The creature's black color was piercing in the lush green background. It was unlike anything Millie had seen before. Initially, Millie was hesitant to approach the creature. It was new to her and could potentially be harmful. She knew the sensible thing was to leave. But curiosity kept the better of her, and she found herself drawing closer, eager to understand the animal. However, close proximity did nothing to shed light on what the unknown creature was. Millie deduced that it resembled a lizard, however, during her many strolls through the forest over the years, she had never before come across a lizard. And it was pretty logical, given that the current environment was less than ideal for substantial reptiles to thrive. It was her father who had once informed her about this fact, sparking fear for the creature's survival. The animal, she reckoned, might not withstand the outdoors for a substantial period. Millie possessed an empty glass jar. She contemplated the idea of capturing the reptile and bringing it home. Despite lacking the knowledge of caring for such a troubled creature, she was confident she could receive some guidance from internet resources. She concluded that the animal would stand a better survival chance under her watch, as opposed to the aggressive outdoor surroundings. Thus, Millie consciously made the decision to take the animal in, a move she would later consider a grave mistake. In her jar, Millie placed some moss and leafage, and the jar had little holes on the lid, allowing air passage. She slowly advanced towards the immobile lizard, subsequently managing to encase it within the jar without causing any more stress. Her concentration was so intense that sweat started forming on her forehead. Just a few more inches, she thought. And then, smoothly, in one swift action, Millie had the creature held captive and secured the lid in the fastest speed she could master. In the jar, the reptile began to break into a frenzy, creating a vibration that Millie could feel through the jar. She quickly placed it in her backpack, hoping the dark would calm the creature, perhaps mimicking a night setting. Millie was oblivious to the fact that lizards are largely nocturnal. Nonetheless, that wasn't her primary concern then. The objective was to transport the creature home as swiftly as possible. En route her home, Millie attempted to research the species of the lizard she had just come across. Having no internet service until she cleared the woodland surroundings, she was of the opinion that her unique black lizard would be easy to identify from the internet information. To her disappointment, however, she found an overwhelming number of variants of black lizards and, despite scrolling through countless images, she failed to spot one that resembled the one she had secured. Upon her arrival at home, her parents were visibly pleased to see her. Having been elsewhere for a while, it's never easy for parents to not be entirely sure about the whereabouts of their 9-year-old child for long spans. Millie was asked by her parents about her day and if anything unique had happened. Millie was extremely uncertain about whether to inform her parents of the lizard she had found and brought home. She desired their guidance, but was also aware that they might not appreciate her bringing an unidentified creature home. She opted to keep her parents oblivious about the black lizard for the time being. It would probably be in her best interest to gain more understanding about it herself before seeking help and suggestions. She just grinned at her parents and mentioned that she had a splendid day, but was pretty tired and wished to unwind in her room for a bit. They were perfectly fine with that, as they had their hands full with their own work. As she shut her bedroom door, she quickly brought out the jar containing the black lizard and set it on her small desk. The creature seemed more relaxed now, contently lounging on the leaf bed she made in the jar. Although the lizard seemed fine, Millie understood that its condition might not remain the same for long. It required food, water, and a more spacious habitat, and these necessities were needed immediately. Fortunately, Millie knew her parents had an old fish tank stowed away in the attic. Given her parents were preoccupied downstairs, this was the perfect chance to fetch the tank. Upon placing the tank in her room, Millie sneaked outside through the window and the roof, ensuring her parents didn't notice. She had gone to the backyard to amass moss, leaves, twigs, and whatever she could gather to convert the old fish tank to a terrarium. Millie had also researched the common diet of lizards and was pleased to find they primarily consumed bugs. As luck would have it, she still had all the bugs she had collected during the day before she stumbled upon the black lizard. She felt remorse for the bugs, but at that moment, the survival of the lizard felt more significant, at least until she had more information about it. Little did she know, this dedication towards aiding the creature would soon cause Millie great remorses. Millie also gathered info about the typical diet of lizards, and fortuitously, they mainly fed on bugs. As she still possessed the insects gathered throughout the day, Millie felt an obligation towards them. However, at that moment, the survival of the black lizard seemed more urgent, at least until she had gathered more information about the creature. Unbeknownst to her then, in the days to come, Millie would second-guess the effort she'd invested in aiding the reptile. Upon returning home, Millie swiftly assembled a terrarium for her scaly friend, placed it in a bowl of water, and cautiously positioned the lizard inside. Anxious about touching the creature, she was unsure if its skin was potentially hazardous or if it could perhaps snap at her. Fortunately, the relocation went off without a hitch. She deposited several live insects in the container and sealed it. Almost instantly, the lizard began to appear comfortable in its new surroundings. Now, the pressing question was what to do next. It wasn't practical to keep and feed the lizard secretly in her bedroom indefinitely. She needed to ponder her true intentions, and foremost, she needed to learn more. In particular, whether or not this creature posed any threat to her. This proved challenging given she couldn't identify this specific lizard online. However, there was a plethora of general advice and warnings about dealing with lizards at her disposal. After extensive research, two encouraging pieces of information jumped out to her. First, lizards seldom bite, and many don't even possess teeth capable of penetrating human flesh. This was especially true for petite lizards like the one she'd discovered. Second, a lizard's danger levels and toxicity are often hinted at by their bright colors. Seeing as her lizard was devoid of any vivid hues, Millie felt reassured that it was not toxic and hence not harmful to her. This knowledge dramatically eased her early concerns about bringing the creature home, and she now even had the confidence to remove it from its enclosure for some interactions. Taking inspiration from her favorite Harry Potter character, Sirius Black, she christened the lizard Sirius. From that point on, her attachment to Sirius began to deepen steadily. As days rolled by, her parents remained blissfully ignorant about Millie's recent companion. What they did notice, however, was her staying indoors much more than her usual outdoor-oriented self. This change seemed rather strange to them because Millie was known for her preference for the outdoors. Yet, at this stage, no red flags were raised in their minds. They frequently visited Millie's room without noticing anything unusual. The secret terrarium she kept hidden beneath her desk eluded their attention, at least for the time being. The first few days unfolded smoothly for Millie and her lizard. Yet, soon, Millie observed some troubling transformations. The lizard, previously active, was now becoming less lively. Its eating patterns dwindled, and Millie perceived the reptile might have stopped drinking altogether. Millie, inexperienced with this species, instinctively sensed this was not a positive sign at all. She fretted that the habitat might still not be suitable enough for the lizard's survival. The creature would likely flourish the most in a semi-tropical climate, but Millie was clueless about how she could create something akin to that in her own room. Internet advice suggested she should have a heat lamp. However, after hunting for options online, she discovered they were beyond her budget. Confronted with this challenging decision, she was determined that the creature's welfare should be her top concern. Despite being terribly nervous, Millie accepted she had to reveal the lizard's existence to her parents. She anticipated their annoyance for withholding this secret for so long, but if they could assist in taking care of the creature, or maybe get it to a vet, it would merit the disclosure. Thus, with trembling knees and the terrarium in her grip, she approached her parents in the lounge. Anastasia was occupied with kitchen chores when Millie descended the stairs. She initially didn't notice what her daughter clutched in her hand. At that time, Michael was still at work. Immediately, she reduced the stove's heat under a boiling pot and swiveled around to greet her daughter cheerfully. Nevertheless, her smile waned at the sight of what Millie held. Was that their old fish tank retrieved from the attic? That Millie could lug that thing down from the attic was curious enough, raising several questions in Anastasia's mind. But then she observed there was not just the old fish tank. There was something living inside it. Observing Millie's distressed expression only added to her worries. Anastasia turned to her daughter, her eyes searching for answers. Yet, as Millie attempted to explain, her words turned into sobs, tears held back for so long finally flowing free. Swiftly, Anastasia took a few steps toward Millie, her gaze now on the fish tank that the child held tightly. There was an abundance of greenery, bits of tree bark, even a dish filled with water. She realized that Millie had put together a makeshift terrarium, but for what purpose? Suddenly, she noticed movement within the tank, causing her to startle and emit a soft shriek. What in the world was her daughter keeping there? Her eyes now identified a shadowy lizard within the tank. It was a creature unlike any she had seen before. Millie, nervous, knew this was her chance to assure her highly uneasy mother that her actions were justified and they must aid the lizard now. Anastasia's gaze bore into Millie, her expression stern. "So, are you going to explain this?" she asked. A swallow at her nerves, and Millie began, her voice shaky. She described rescuing the creature, insisting it would have perished had she not intervened. She swore that she handled it with utmost care, a statement not entirely accurate, but conveyed out of desperation to save the creature. Anastasia watched her daughter, the wheels in her head turning. A part of her was furious at Millie, for she had been firm on her stance. Don't bring home unknown animals. She was well aware of Millie's disregard for her instruction. Yet, she was at odds with her anger, given Millie's admirable concern for the well-being of the tiny creature. She seemed to have been prudent in her care. As Anastasia mulled over how to proceed, Michael's arrival disrupted her thoughts. He returned in high spirits after a good day at work. His joy only amplified on spotting the reptile in the tank. He was thrilled by the sight. As a dedicated nature enthusiast, Michael always relished the experience of viewing animals in their natural habitats. The unknown nature of this particular creature drew him in, piquing his interest further. Anastasia, aware of her husband's fervor about this discovery, decided to withhold any preventive measures until later. After all the excitement had diminished, she reassured a seemingly anxious Millie. Anastasia swiftly moved the conversation towards what needs doing next, cognizant of the fact that Millie hadn't flagged this creature to them without reason. Millie relayed to her parents that Sirius, her mysterious lizard friend, wasn't faring too well. Sirius had begun to consume less and noticeably lacked energy than when she had initially discovered him. Millie suspected the creature either to be sick or that their surroundings weren't conducive for it. She believed that they should consult a vet to ensure Sirius's welfare before it's too late. Yet, Michael proposed an alternative view. He reasoned that Sirius had been thriving in their local environment, as the concerns arose only after Millie had captured and constrained him in a considerably smaller glass cage. From Michael's perspective, it wasn't unusual for a wild creature to exhibit signs of fatigue or depression when their habitat is dramatically reduced. Perhaps the solution wasn't a visit to the vet, but restoring the creature back to its natural home. Millie considered her father's viewpoint, acknowledging that she had overlooked this possibility. However, there was still a lingering concern in her. What if the creature needed aid? It was evident that her parents weren't keen on investigating this theory. If she wanted further action, she realized the onus fell on her. Thus, she proposed an idea which took her parents by surprise, reinforcing her dedication towards aiding the creature. She offered to cover all the veterinary expenses if her parents would accompany her. She would also release the lizard back into the forest if it was deemed healthy. Michael hinted at the financial implications, suggesting it might drain all her savings and could lead to years of debt if treatment is required. Millie, however, was unfazed by these potential setbacks. She displayed a determined stance, which her parents had no option but to admire and respect. While Anastasia was hesitant about her daughter spending all her savings on this peculiar interest, Michael was supportive of his daughter pursuing her passions. He didn't need much persuasion to convince his wife either. Anastasia realized that if this was an endeavor that truly mattered to Millie, then opposing her might be a wrong step, even if it involved Millie spending all her saved money. Michael reached out to the veterinary office to schedule a checkup for the rescued lizard that day. Fortunately, they managed to secure an appointment for later in the day. Michael figured it would be a swift 10-minute affair, merely a routine checkup. However, the reality would be starkly different, a fact that the vet would come to realize only upon seeing the lizard. In the few hours they had before their vet appointment, Millie and Michael invested their time in studying the black lizard themselves and conducting additional research. Quite cleverly, Michael chose to wear gloves while handling the lizard. A precaution that Millie should have considered earlier. Despite her insistence that she was extremely cautious, the lizard showed visible improvements out of the glass box. Michael tried to securely hold the creature, but it squirmed a lot in his grip and even managed to escape once. Fortunately, they had the foresight to handle the lizard in their closed-off bathroom, thus preventing its complete escape. But this behavior partly confirmed Michael's theories, and Millie was beginning to feel anxious. If Michael's conjecture was correct, Millie would be spending her money on a futile vet visit. As per their agreement, she would have to part with her little friend after all. But now she was too committed to back out, and hence decided to maintain her confidence in the decision. They swiftly returned the lizard to the cage, preparing to head out. The journey to the vet was nerve-wracking for Millie. She couldn't take her eyes off Sirius as he squirmed hectically inside the glass box. Sirius was probably struggling to understand why he felt like he was moving when he was stationary. Millie compared Sirius's confusion to their cat's similar reaction during car rides. She just yearned that this venture would not overly distress the creature. Upon reaching the veterinarian's clinic, Millie and Michael were informed that they had to linger a bit due to the vet's ongoing operation that was running longer than predicted. They were entirely fine with this, and Millie even felt a wave of relief. This offered Sirius some time to settle down before the scheduled examination. A composed lizard was undeniably easier to examine than a jittery one. Around half an hour later, they were beckoned into the office by a weary-looking vet. Due to the prolonged operation, it was past the clinic's closing time, and Millie turned out to be his final client for the day. All the vet wanted was to wrap this up and retreat home. However, after laying his eyes on the lizard, he recognized immediately that things wouldn't be so straightforward today. His reaction was something Millie would recall for a long time. The second the vet donned his glasses to scrutinize the unusually black lizard, Millie witnessed his eyes widen immediately, as if hit by an epiphany. He appeared to brim with renewed vigor and hastily backed away from the box. He commanded Millie and Michael to retreat as swiftly as they could. Startled, the pair abided by his orders nonetheless, thirsty for an explanation. Before they could pepper him with questions, they were advised to stay put while the vet rapidly transported the glass box to an adjacent room. Desiring to tail him, she was stopped by her father. He too was perturbed by the unfolding events, but was sensible enough to understand that they were powerless at this moment. The only choice was to await the vet's return to seek answers. Millie and Michael fretted in the room for nearly 20 minutes. They overheard the vet making multiple phone calls with a tremulous voice. Something seemed off, and they had a sinking feeling it wasn't good news. At last, after a quarter of an hour's silence, the vet re-entered the room, but this time ominously devoid of the lizard, which immediately alarmed Millie. Millie insisted to know what transpired and where he had taken her little companion. The vet, on the other hand, was not ready to reveal any details unless they responded to some of his inquests. After a considerable amount of persuasion, Michael was finally able to soothe his young one, and they both sat with the veterinarian to give all the necessary assistance. Millie narrated to him where and how she discovered the creature, the type of care she provided for it, and the kind of food she had supplied it with. With a trace of regret, she also confessed to handling the creature with unprotected hands. This confession landed her a disapproving shake of the head from the vet and a disheartened gaze from her dad. It was clear she had not been entirely honest about handling the creature with caution. If it carried any poisonous properties, Millie could possibly be in great peril. But the vet promptly alleviated their worries. The vet seemed gratified with Millie's responses and heaved a sigh of relief. He assured them that Millie was in no potential harm, as the creature would only be slightly toxic if it happened to bite, which was not the case with Millie. He mentioned that he had informed proper authority to retrieve the reptile. He expected them to arrive soon. Tears welled up in Millie's eyes when she heard her pet lizard was scheduled to be taken away, but the vet pacified her by telling he had no alternatives. He recognized the lizard immediately he sighted it. Any professional veterinarian in the region would have done the same. Recently, an alert was broadcasted to all veterinarian animal shelters and related bodies to be vigilant for the sighting of this specific creature. He proceeded to explain that this lizard was an extremely unique and threatened species, with none left in the wild and only a handful existed at all. These few were housed under specific breeding schemes designed to increase their dwindling population. The lizard named Sirius was actually an escapee from one such program from a nearby university in Millie's neighborhood. Being the only male in the program, its recovery was crucial. But finding its whereabouts was like finding a needle in a haystack, as it could have been anywhere amidst the forest after its escape. Thus, Millie unintentionally locating and capturing the lizard was like a one-in-a-snillion phenomenal occurrence. The revelation took Michael and Millie by surprise, and they now willingly handed over the reptile. It was evident that Sirius was destined for a grander purpose than being a domestic pet or a stray in the wild. He had the assignment to rescue an entire species, and Millie was solely responsible for making this achievable once more. As a result, she also received recognition. The university pledged to cover her initial 2 years of studies, should she choose this path. Needless to say, she didn't need to spend a dime of her savings on veterinarian fees.